You are lying in your bed. It is 3 in the morning. You wake suddenly, though you do not know why. Your eyes open, and you see your familiar ceiling, the shadows of your furniture, the dim light filtering through your window. Everything is normal. Everything is safe, except you cannot move. Not your arms, not your legs, not even your head. You try to call out, but your voice is gone, trapped somewhere deep in your paralyzed throat. And then you feel it. A presence in the room. Not imagined, not dreamed. Real in a way that transcends explanation. Your eyes strain to the limit of their frozen sockets, and you see it. At the foot of your bed, or in the corner, or standing in your doorway. A figure. Dark. Humanoid but wrong. No face you can discern. No features you can describe later. Just a shape that should not exist, radiating malevolence so intense that your paralyzed body tries to scream but cannot. The weight on your chest increases. The shadow moves closer, and you understand with absolute clarity that you are about to die. This is sleep paralysis. And if you think this is rare, if you believe this is isolated to you, you are wrong. This experience has been documented in every culture on Earth across thousands of years. The entity you just encountered has haunted humanity since we first began recording our nightmares. And the most disturbing part? We still do not fully understand why. The ancient Sumerians carved descriptions of it into clay tablets 4,000 years ago. A demon that sits on the chest of sleeping victims, stealing their breath and crushing their spirit. The Greeks called it Ephialtes. The Romans knew it as incubus and succubus, demonic entities that violated the sleeping through sexual assault. Medieval Europe lived in terror of the Old Hag, a witch who perched on your chest at night, paralyzing you with her malevolent gaze. In Newfoundland fishing villages, this entity became the Old Hag with such consistency that nearly every family had a story of encountering her. Japanese culture developed the term Kanashibari, meaning bound in metal, to describe the sensation of being utterly immobilized while a demon presses down with crushing weight. In Korean tradition, the guinulada or scissor press describes the same phenomenon. West African folklore speaks of the Tokoloshe, a dwarf-like creature that climbs onto your chest and steals your life force. Hmong refugees in America began dying mysteriously in their sleep during the 1980s, and their families knew exactly what was happening. The dabbed sog, the suffocating spirit, had followed them from Southeast Asia. Every culture, every era, every geographic region. The same experience. Paralysis, crushing pressure, overwhelming terror, and the shadow figure. Always the shadow figure. Modern medicine dismisses this as sleep paralysis, a glitch in the transition between REM sleep and waking consciousness. Your brain wakes up, but the paralysis that prevents you from acting out dreams remains active, creating a terrifying liminal state where you are conscious but trapped. The shadow figure, according to neuroscience, is a hallucination generated by a hyperactive amygdala, your brain's fear center operating in overdrive without the rational prefrontal cortex to moderate its panic. But here is what medicine cannot fully explain. Why is the hallucination so consistent? Why does every culture, with no contact or shared mythology, generate the same shadowy humanoid entity? Why not random nightmares? Why not colorful fantasies? Why specifically this dark, malevolent, humanoid shape that radiates threat? To understand the cultural interpretations, we must first understand the experience itself. Sleep paralysis occurs during the transitions between wakefulness and sleep. When you fall asleep and enter this state, it is called hypnagogic paralysis. When you wake from sleep into this state, it is hypnopompic paralysis. During normal REM sleep, your brain paralyzes your body to prevent you from physically acting out dreams. This is called REM autonoia, a sophisticated protective mechanism that has evolved over millions of years. But sometimes, this mechanism misfires. Your conscious mind wakes while the paralysis remains active. You become aware of your body's inability to move, and this awareness triggers an immediate panic response. Your amygdala, already hyperactive during REM sleep, floods your system with fear signals. Your brain, trying to make sense of this inexplicable situation, does what human brains have always done. It creates a narrative. It assigns cause. And in the darkness of your bedroom, with your primal fear system activated and your body refusing to respond, your brain generates the most ancient threat it knows. Predator. Presence. An entity with malevolent intent. The shadow figure is not random. It is your brain's attempt to explain why you cannot move, why you are terrified, why you feel crushing weight on your chest. And it draws from the deepest wells of human evolutionary psychology. For hundreds of thousands of years, the greatest threat to sleeping humans was predators. Lions, tigers, other humans with violent intent. Our ancestors who woke paralyzed needed to understand the threat immediately, and their brains evolved to generate a predator presence even when none existed, because the cost of ignoring a real predator was death. This is why the shadow figure is always humanoid or animal-shaped, always threatening, always positioned in predator locations like doorways or at the foot of the bed. Your brain is running ancient threat detection software, and in the absence of real sensory input, it fills the gaps with the most likely danger. But cultural interpretation added layers to this neurological phenomenon. Medieval Christians understood sleep paralysis through their theology of demonic oppression. The shadow figure was not brain chemistry. It was Satan's servants, sent to torment the faithful and tempt them towards sin. Entire theological treatises were written about combating these night demons through prayer, holy water, and ritual protection. The fact that everyone in Christian Europe experienced the same entity was not evidence of shared neurology. It was proof of hell's existence and the devil's power. Japanese Buddhism interpreted Kanashibari through concepts of karma and spiritual imbalance. If the shadow figure visited you, it meant unresolved debts from past lives or disrupted harmony with the spirit world. The paralysis was not a malfunction. It was a message demanding attention to your spiritual practice. African animist tradition saw the Tokoloshe as a real entity that could be summoned by witches to attack enemies. The paralysis was proof of sorcery, and protection required counter-magic, Sangoma's traditional healers, and powerful muti medicine. These were not primitive misunderstandings. These were sophisticated systems of meaning that integrated the sleep paralysis experience into coherent worldviews. They provided not just explanation but response, ritual, community validation, permission to speak about an experience so terrifying that without cultural framework, victims might believe themselves insane. Modern sleep research began documenting sleep paralysis scientifically in the 20th century, and what they found was both reassuring and deeply strange. The phenomenon is more common than most people realize. Studies suggest that anywhere from 8% to 50% of people will experience sleep paralysis at least once in their lives, with higher rates among students, shift workers, and people with disrupted sleep schedules. The physiological mechanism is well understood. During REM sleep, your brainstem shuts down motor neurons through a complex interaction of neurotransmitters. Gamma-aminobutyric acid and glycine inhibit motor activity. Your voluntary muscles become temporarily paralyzed except for your diaphragm, which continues breathing, and your eye muscles, which create the rapid eye movements that give REM its name. When you wake naturally, this paralysis releases within seconds. But sometimes the timing is off. Your consciousness activates while the paralysis remains, creating the terrifying experience of being awake but unable to move. The hallucinations that accompany sleep paralysis have also been studied extensively. They fall into three categories. Intruder hallucinations are the shadow figures we have been discussing, generated by hyperactive threat detection in the amygdala and temporal parietal junction. Incubus hallucinations are the crushing weight on your chest, created by your brain interpreting the difficulty of breathing against paralyzed chest muscles. Vestibular motor hallucinations are the sensations of floating, flying, or leaving your body, generated by confused signals from your vestibular system when it cannot reconcile your inner sense of position with your actual paralyzed state. All of this is well documented, repeatable, measurable through polysomnography and brain imaging. And yet, the mystery deepens. Because while we can explain the mechanism, we cannot explain the consistency of the experience across cultures that had no contact with each other. Why does a medieval English peasant, a Japanese samurai, a West African villager, and a modern American teenager all generate the exact same shadowy humanoid entity? If these are purely internal hallucinations created by individual brains, why are they not more random? Why not monsters from that person's specific cultural mythology? Why not familiar threatening figures like abusive relatives? Why specifically this archetypal dark humanoid that appears nowhere in your daily life? And if this is your worldview, If you are realizing that sleep paralysis represents one of humanity's most universal experiences, one that bridges every culture and every era, subscribe to this channel. Because what we are exploring is not just neuroscience. It is the question of whether human consciousness, when placed in specific conditions, accesses something deeper than individual experience. Whether there are patterns written into our species that transcend culture and training. Some researchers have proposed that the shadow figure is a Jungian archetype, a shared image from the collective unconscious that emerges when our defenses are down. Others suggest it is evidence of evolutionary psychology, a hardwired template for predator recognition that has been carved into our neural architecture across millions of years. But there is a third possibility that modern materialist science struggles to address. What if the consistency of the experience suggests that in this liminal state between waking and sleep, between paralysis and freedom, human consciousness briefly touches something real? Not neurological hallucination, but genuine perception of an entity or dimension that normally remains hidden. The medieval Christians might have been wrong about the theology, but what if they were not wrong about the presence? Today, sleep paralysis continues, but the cultural interpretation has shifted in fascinating ways. In the West, where traditional religious frameworks have weakened, the shadow figure has been recontextualized. Starting in the 1960s, people began reporting not demons or hags, but alien abductions. The experience was identical. Paralysis, crushing weight, overwhelming fear, and the presence of entities. But now they were described as gray aliens with large eyes, conducting medical experiments. Sleep researchers quickly recognized this as sleep paralysis reinterpreted through contemporary cultural mythology. The mechanism was unchanged, but the narrative overlay had shifted from demons to extraterrestrials. More recently, internet culture has generated new names for the shadow figure. The Hatman Shadow People. The entities described in online forums are remarkably consistent. Tall, dark, often wearing what appears to be a wide-brimmed hat or hood. Malevolent. Present during sleep paralysis or glimpsed in peripheral vision. Thousands of reports. Same description. Different eras. Different countries. Same entity. Some sleep paralysis experiencers have learned to break the paralysis through specific techniques, focusing all mental energy on moving a single finger or toe, because while most motor neurons are inhibited, not all are equally suppressed. Controlled breathing, because your diaphragm is never paralyzed. Attempting to move your eyes, which remain active during REM sleep. Some have developed more esoteric methods. Lucid dreamers report that recognizing you are in sleep paralysis allows you to either wake yourself through practice techniques or to shift into a lucid dream state where the paralysis transforms into conscious dream control. Others claim that confronting the shadow figure, refusing to show fear, or even attempting to communicate with it causes the entity to dissolve or retreat. Whether this is psychological self-regulation or something more remains disputed. What is not disputed is that sleep paralysis can be managed. Regular sleep schedules reduce its frequency. Sleeping on your side rather than your back decreases likelihood. Reducing stress and anxiety limits episodes. Treatment for underlying sleep disorders like narcolepsy or sleep apnea eliminates associated paralysis. But here is what remains unexplained. The people who experience sleep paralysis repeatedly, who learn to navigate it, who study it deliberately, often report that the shadow figure changes, that it becomes less threatening, that communication, or something like communication, becomes possible, that the entity reveals itself not as hallucination, but as something with consistent personality across encounters. These reports are dismissed by mainstream science as confabulation, as the brain creating false continuity between separate random hallucinations. But the people experiencing it know what they experienced. They know the difference between obviously dreamlike content and the sharp, hyperreal quality of sleep paralysis entities. And they insist that what they encountered was not random neural noise, but presence. So what is the shadow figure? If you demand a purely materialist explanation, the answer is clear. It is a hallucination generated by a hyperactive amygdala during a state of consciousness where your body is paralyzed but your mind is awake. It is the product of evolutionary psychology meeting sleep disorder, creating a consistent threat perception that all humans share because we all share the same neural architecture. The shadow figure is you. Your fear. Your ancient predator detection system operating without the moderating influence of your rational brain. But if you allow for even the possibility that consciousness is more complex than materialist neuroscience suggests, the question becomes more difficult. Because the consistency of experience, the cross-cultural uniformity, the reports from experienced observers who insist this feels qualitatively different from normal dreams or hallucinations, all point towards something that might exceed individual brain chemistry. Perhaps the shadow figure is not generated by your brain, but perceived by your brain. Perhaps in the liminal state of sleep paralysis, when the normal filters of consciousness are disrupted, you briefly perceive something that is always present but normally invisible. An entity, a dimension, a layer of reality that our waking minds are designed to screen out. This is not provable. It is not repeatable under controlled laboratory conditions. It lives in the space between subjective experience and objective measurement. But that does not make it irrelevant. Because sleep paralysis teaches us something crucial about the human condition. That the line between brain and mind, between material and immaterial, between hallucination and perception, is far blurrier than we pretend. That experiences which are universal across all cultures and all eras deserve serious attention even when they resist simple explanation. That dismissing something as merely neurological does not fully account for the phenomenology, the lived experience, the consistency of reports across human history. The shadow figure has been with us since the beginning. It has survived every cultural shift, every scientific revolution, every attempt to explain it away. And it remains, visiting sleepers in every country, every night, generating the same terror and the same questions. If you have experienced sleep paralysis, you are not alone. You are not insane. You are part of a human experience that stretches back thousands of years. And whether the shadow figure is neurological glitch or genuine encounter, your experience is valid. It is real in the way that matters most. It affected you, changed you, showed you something about the strangeness of consciousness that most people never confront. If this exploration made you reconsider what you thought you knew about the boundary between brain and world, between science and experience, share this video. Because stories like this are not just about sleep disorders or folklore. They are about the mystery of being human. About the possibility that our subjective experiences matter even when they cannot be reduced to equations. About the humility of accepting that consciousness might be stranger, deeper, and more connected to forces beyond individual neurons than our current models suggest. The shadow figure is waiting. In your bedroom. In your dreams. In the space between sleep and waking. The question is not whether it is real. The question is what real means when experience is consistent across billions of people, but remains invisible to instruments. And whether we are brave enough to accept that some mysteries resist solution. Some presences resist capture. Some truths live only in the territory between science and soul, where the shadow figure has always dwelt.